Hello. We'll try to do a weekly show. Just finishing up listening to Hancock. So we had left off at Shannon-Paulk and the good news on that case. So I'm going to jump right in because I know it's getting late for some people. But let's see. Gina says I may have to catch the later show because those storms, like for a month, it's tornado warnings and severe lightning, but beautiful to watch at times. Good to see updates. Great stuff. Well, thank you. Hey, Lake. Hey, Otto. Glad y'all came back. Yeah, I love watching storms too. But so I wanted to touch on Ray Hainish and then the trial of Ashley Garth, which is now in the appeals process. So let me go ahead and start with Ray Hainish, and I just wanted to read a little bit of an article I found. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. Mm-hmm. Oh, the pop-ups and the slow internet connection, apparently. Okay. I got it. Hey, Lips. Hey, Hoosier. Glad you guys could make it over. Lake, Kaleidoscope of Crime, Crimezilla, Ivy. All right. Let us begin. This is... Let me share my screen. I'll try to make it the biggest one because it is pretty small. So Senate Enrolled Act number 177, an act to amend the Indiana Code concerning criminal law and procedure. So this is going to be something that will help investigations concerning uncharged deaths. That was the one kind of key that I wanted to hone in on in this, but it's also for cold cases. Like it says here, reasonable suspicion of a criminal act. It has to be done by a immediate family member. So I can't do this. It would have to be Ray's mom. Maybe maybe one of his sisters could. I'm not sure on that, but I think it has to be his mom. It was accepted, and let me get to the meat of the okay, so basically that a local law enforcement AG has determined was not the result of a criminal act committed by a third person. So that would be where I'm not sure if you guys follow the Tanner Barton's mom. I know that Can't Stop, Won't Stop, the couple from Michigan, has been helping them, and they seem pretty good. But I know that I've talked with Tanner Barton's mom in the past, and she is very passionate and she is a go-getter. And this is where the section 5, 7.5, I think, would be where she is trying to see where this could help her with her son's unsolved, well, in her there is no charges at all, and she feels that there should be, and so an outside investigation, because let's all be real, we've seen a lot not come out of Howard County. Just off the top of my head, you've got oh, now it's not on the top of my head. Why is it escaping me? Oh my gosh. Karina McClurkin. That's one off the top of my head, where poor Jerry has just been through the ringer in Howard County and Kokomo, Indiana, for Karina. It is, it's very disturbing. And so I can see where you would definitely want an outside person. And so basically where it comes into effect with Ray Hainish is, okay, what it can't do is the right to request a new investigation. This chapter does not apply to the death of a person under the care of a physician. If the person's death is a result of a medical malpractice. So that is not on the table for this act, but affect the authority of the state Indiana. Okay, this chapter does not affect the authority of state police department to conduct a new investigation. An immediate family member of a person whose death is an uncharged death and who has reasonable suspicion that the uncharged death was caused by the criminal act of a third person has the right to request the superintendent of the state police department to conduct a new investigation to determine whether the death was the result of a criminal act committed by a third person. An immediate family member has the right to request a new investigation, even if the state police department assisted local law enforcement agencies in earlier investigation of the uncharged death, which does apply. The Indiana State Police did help with the investigation in White County for Ray Hainish. Immediate family member who wishes the state police department to conduct a new investigation as described in section 2 of this chapter must request the new investigation in writing, describe the immediate family member's relationship to the deceased, describe the determination by the local law enforcement agencies. So basically they would be telling Superintendent Doug Carter that who they are to Ray, and that where things have stood with the investigation in White County, which is now in the prosecutor's hands. It was turned over to the prosecutor, and he has done nothing as far as charges. He has told them that they have 5 years to charge him with a felony. Surely they're going to charge him with the felony. And then murder has no statute of limitations, but he seems to be holding strong that there was no murder. And so him having said that, which we don't agree with, but it kind of makes you wonder if, so he's only got 5 years, so 2019, so we will see. But he was kind of like, well, maybe he'll get to talking in prison, and then maybe we can charge him with more. Anyways, we've talked about that on the podcast. There's a lot to this, to Ray Hainish's murder, that is very suspicious. Just the way everything has gone on, and especially after going to Ashley Garth's trial, it is, I feel even stronger on what I have already said. And yeah, I was right. I'm just going to say it. Like, a lot of the things, during the trial were confirmed as far as Nicole Bowen's case, but there was also elements that kind of confirm Ray Hainish's case as well. And I hope that whether it ends up being the Indiana State Police or in White County, that they subpoena the exhibit and that they can use whatever is there to get some charges against him, against Garrett Kurtz, for what he did to Ray Hainish. Yes, Monica, they really do. What's going on? The tractor comes up in my medical records a few times. This time it caused an early tumor to bleed. Surgery next month, pulling a kidney out. Oh, yeesh. That sucks. One of my surgeries was kidney, and it was, I didn't know what level 10 pain was. I didn't have a clue what a level 10 pain was on a pain scale. I do now. Hey, Swifty. All right, so I'm going to go back over here. So she would basically just need to outline what the criminal act is, where it stands in that county, and list every fact that forms the basis of the immediate family member's reasonable suspicion, and explaining any reasonable inferences drawn from facts described in Clause B, and notify the local law enforcement agency and the prosecuting attorney that the immediate family member has requested a new investigation. I like that. An immediate family member is entitled to request a new investigation under this chapter, even if another immediate family member objects to the request. Nobody's going to be objecting. Upon receipt of a request for a new investigation, the superintendent of the state police department shall, as soon as practicable, review the written request and, if warranted, conduct any further investigation. If the state police department assisted the local law enforcement agency in the earlier investigation, the superintendent of the state police department shall consider assigning an officer to review the request who did not participate in the earlier investigation. That's a key right there. Unless assigning a new officer is impracticable. It's late. Apparently, I can't read. Oh my gosh. The review of a request under this chapter shall be conducted without regard to the conclusions of the earlier investigation. However, an officer conducting the new investigation may rely on forensic and other evidence collected during the earlier investigation. At the conclusion of the review, the superintendent of the state police department shall provide the immediate family member who requested the investigation with a concise written summary of the determination made by the state police. A determination made by the state police under this section is not subject to judicial review. A coroner and local law enforcement agencies shall, upon request by the superintendent of the state police department, exchange information with, cooperate with, and assist the state police department in reviewing the request, and if applicable, conducting the new investigation. An immediate family member is only entitled to request a new investigation under this chapter if the earlier investigation resulted in an uncharged death. An immediate family member is not entitled to request a new investigation under this chapter because the family member is dissatisfied with any other aspect of the earlier investigation, including the failure to identify a suspect or the identification or exclusion of a particular person as a criminal suspect, and a conclusion concerning which criminal offense resulting in death was committed. The superintendent of the state police department is only required to consider a request to conduct one new investigation, regardless of the number of immediate family members who request a new investigation. So, I want to just make sure on this one, an immediate family member is not entitled to request because the family member is dissatisfied with any other aspect of the earlier investigation, including failure to identify a suspect. They did identify a suspect because he confessed. Conclusion concerning with criminal offense resulting in death was committed. I might have to get like some kind of help interpreting that part. Because to me, I don't know about you guys, but to me it seems like, why in the world else would you be requesting a outside investigation? Does that make sense? Or did I read that wrong? Anybody? Anybody want to help me interpret the law? Yeah, I didn't have a kidney removed. I asked for them to remove it multiple times. I asked for them to put me in a coma multiple times. So that really sucked. But yeah, I had to have the surgery was basically like after it was over, my kidney wasn't working right. And so it would just, every time they tried to take out the stent and to get the kidney to work on its own, it was like a level 10. Like, I know what that means now. And so who knows, maybe having a kidney removed, I would think it would be less painful. which sounds crazy, but I had just had another surgery and had some parts removed, and it was a piece of cake. So I don't know. As long as you're, as you know, you get 2 kidneys, as long as your other kidney is working right, it should be, um, it probably should be, it'll probably be better than what I went through. And see, it's doing it to me again. Like, it did this to me last night. Like, it says I have new comments, but like I can't scroll down anymore. So I don't know. Someone else say hi and see if it shows up. Hmm. It's so weird. Well, did I freeze? Okay. I guess it's just not gonna let me see comments on here anymore. It's so weird. I don't know why it keeps doing this. And I don't really know how to fix it. Okay. Wait. Now there's more. Okay. It's still streaming. Hey, Sharon. Or if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it is he admitted to his actions being the cause of Ray's death, but claims it was accidental. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. But there is other, yeah, I can't really say, but there is a lot that he has said himself, and a lot that you can read in the autopsy report that definitely, and that was left at the crime scene, which was Ray's home, that leads one to believe that this was not an accident, that this was planned, and this was planned quite a while in advance, which would be conspiracy to commit murder. And you can't plan an accident, that's not a thing. You can't plan to have an accident and accidentally kill someone. So it's either or. And it seems like the prosecutor is just choosing to believe what he wants to believe. And that's a confirmation bias. That's not doing your due diligence and looking at all the aspects of a case like you're supposed to be doing. And I guarantee you that if this was in a different county, such as Newton County, this would not be going on. This would not be happening. And there's just so much more to this that is so disturbing. And it's so disturbing that there's yet to be anything. And hopefully, if they can use this new bill, this new section of the bill that they just enacted, and they can, if Ray's family can submit this to ISP and get a external investigation, I think that not only will he be charged with felonies, he will be charged with murder again. And I also hope that the family of Stephen Masterson, I hope that they, that would be considered a closed, no fel, it would fall under this bill as well, as for them to submit in writing for ISP to take a look and reopen his death investigation. I wholeheartedly believe, and I've been right on some other things in this case, and it's, taken 2019 to now to get the confirmations of that, but the confirmations are still there. And it's only because I'm super anal. And when I look at things with given, I'm not a detective, I'm not a prosecutor or judge, or I'm not in any of those roles. So it's just me doing what I can with what I have. And this stuff was just not hard to find and not hard to put together. I mean, it's not like Garrett Kurtz is a rocket scientist. I'm not even sure he's smarter than a fifth grader, to be honest. So it doesn't take a lot of effort to just go through his Facebook alone and go back and look at the fight that they got in, him and Steven, that they got in just before the accident on his moped. The fact that Garrett Kurtz, in writing, he says that and I'm sure they can track down IP. I'm sure he'd just flat out admit it. I mean, look what he did on the other channel. But he says that he was behind him and he watched him go off the road. Yeah, I bet he did. And he stayed with him, took him into his arms, and he posts about it pretty much every year when it comes up on the anniversary. And if you look at the area, it's there in Brookston. It's right by Garrett's house where he would live with his father, which he was there at that time, according to his own words. And he even has video about this on his Facebook. So it's not a far jump to, especially in hindsight of like what we know about Garrett now. The hot temper, the proclivity to violence, his criminal history even before all these murders. And that's why it's like, yeah, like he's a very violent, hot-tempered person. Is he conniving and like smart, or did he show any signs of being able to get away with anything? Not really. He just got extremely lucky. He left before anyone arrived on the scene of Stephen Masterson. I'm pretty sure he was questioned at the very least, but it doesn't appear that he was charged with anything other than just like leaving the scene of an accident, which is suspicious in and of itself. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he chased him off the road. So it wouldn't necessarily be a murder charge, but it would probably be a vehicular manslaughter. It would be something. And then, of course, Ray was killed, 2 weeks before Nicole? And all that he put on Facebook about that, what Ashley Garth put on Facebook about that. I mean, these people are not smart. They're not smart, deviant criminals here. Like, to where they can just, they're not, they're lucky until they weren't. So that is where I stand on that. And I hope that Ray's family will consider writing the superintendent of Indiana State Police to see if they can get an outside investigation. And that means that, like we read in there, that they have to cooperate. The coroner, they have to cooperate with giving them evidence and things like that. So keep his mouth shut and expect his sentence from what? That white, otherwise death in prison. Yeah. And see, and that's one thing that we'll get into, because he was already he's in the Pendleton. I think he's in Pendleton. But him testifying against Ashley Garth in and of itself put Garrett at a huge risk in prison. And he did it anyway. And he didn't get a deal. Like, there was yes, there was a plea deal. He accepted a plea deal. But as far as it being contingent upon, or like some, big thing like that wasn't the case. They said that in court, that he did this of his own accord. Of course, they have his, initial interviews and everything like that. But his testimony that he testified to at Ashley's trial was also corroborated by Talitha Beckley's first interview that they showed in court for Ashley Garth's trial. 55 years? And that's not a sweet deal, and 45 to life is 45 is the least amount of a sentence that you can get for murder in the state of Indiana, and it goes up from there. So 55 years is quite a long time, and to be honest, I don't think that they would have got a lick more at a trial for him, because you have to take into account the mitigating circumstances. And while there could have been a huge aggravating circumstance as far as the murder of Ray Hainish per se, the aggravating and mitigating circumstances with a guy like Garrett Kurtz, and as young as Garrett Kurtz is, they probably wouldn't have got any more than 55 years at a jury trial. So there's that. Yeah. I mean, and he's just, yeah. He's just a piece of work, I'll tell you what. But anyways, I'm going to read really quick. Talitha Beckley was just sentenced. She was a co-conspirator. Well, I guess I can't say that. She was only charged with assisting a criminal, and the criminal assisted committed murder for the murder of Nicole Bowen. So we're going to switch over to Nicole Bowen. She was murdered by Garrett Kurtz and Ashley Garth. They have already been tried and sentenced. And I will get into Ashley's sentencing here in a minute. But Talitha Beckley was the last one, and this just happened July 26th of this year. And she was, she took a plea deal, but she also was, they found that they could give her the habitual offender. So she got 4 years for the habitual offender, and she got 4 years for her charge of assisting a criminal. So 1 to 6 years is what the felony 5 is for assisting a criminal and criminal assisted committed murder. She could have got, 6, but they gave her 4. But this was a plea deal. So 8 years total. It's pretty good considering what the others were given. But this 8 years is to be conserved consecutive to the sentence that was imposed upon her in her felony 4 case in another county. She and another co-defendant broke into a home and said that they were just there to take a pee, if you remember me covering that. So it was a robbery. And I mean, they had him dead to rights. Like, they were caught. Like, I'm pretty sure the guy was like, they were on vacation, but they had like video surveillance or alarm system that went off when they went into their house. And so, but this was, I want to say in I can't remember. 2018 is what I'm thinking in my head, but that could just be me talking out of my ass. But anyways, she's just violated probation over and over and over again. And so she has violated again. And so now whatever she gets in whatever sentence was left of her original sentence, because now that she can't be on probation for that anymore, that sentence would be served incarceration. Consecutive means that concurrent means that you can serve the sentences inside of each other. So basically, whichever is your most lengthy sentence, say like in Ashley Garth's case, she was charged with murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and assisting a criminal. So 48 years, 30 years, and I'll get to it in a second. So basically, like 48 years is what she gets because she can serve the other sentence inside. Consecutive means they're like, if Ashley Garth was made to serve the murder and then the conspiracy and then the assisting a criminal. So it would be like 48 plus 30 plus whatever she got for assisting a criminal. So that's good news. She was given a credit of 929 days towards her sentence. So 8 times 365 minus 929 is anybody? It was like, I wrote it down, but I think it's like 1,000. So it's like 4.5 years, and then whatever she'll serve on the other case. So yeah. And she is a real piece of shit. Like, she is a career criminal. I mean, her criminal history is just it's ridiculous. I have no doubt that she played more of a role in Nicole's murder. But again, it's about what you can prove. And I don't know how she wasn't charged with, what would be the charge? Man, my brain was more tired than my body, I guess. I don't know. Hi, Dana. to where, you know, a part of her plea deal was testify against Ashley Garth. And she got on the stand. I mean, she spilled it all. She spilled all the tea in her interview, her initial interviews with the Newton County detectives and investigators that interviewed her. It was corroborated by Garrett and the evidence and on down the line, all but Ashley. So when she gets on the stand and just is like, I don't know, I don't remember. Yeah, I guess I wasn't there that day, but it was talked about in closing arguments, and it was pretty damn ridiculous of just her amnesia all of a sudden. But then again, you know, this is a girl that lived with Palladino. Not sure why there isn't any charges on that cat, but he was definitely implicated. So with her relationship with him and the fact that they have the same address, you would think, or catty corner. But then, I mean, it's just so it's been inferred that they were together. But then there's the fact that their residents are on the same property. There's that. So, yeah, that 3 people conspired to kill another, except for, you know, the 4th being the other person's girlfriend. This doesn't make a lot of sense. But, yeah, so she owes $1 to the court and 185 and 100. Why would they write it like this? Public defender fee. And yeah, we'll see. She has a lot of fines that she's not paid. So I hope they can get in line. But yeah. And that was that on her. Then we get over to Ashley Garth. So she was already, you know, she was found guilty by a jury of her peers. And I'm telling you, this jury, I sat and watched them for, how many days did I go? Was it Tuesday? Was it 3 or 4 days? I think 3 days. Yeah, 3. Oh my God, my memory is terrible. Yeah, 3 days. And I watched the jury a lot. I mean, the courtroom is tiny. And these were some on-point jurors. I mean, they were like, came in, were like ready to do their job. They were very, they did a really good job picking them. They had really good alternates, which they did end up needing to use an alternate. And they were diverse. There was all ages. I mean, they were all like, seemed like all walks of life. But they were on top of it. I mean, the amount of notes this jury took, like, it was crazy. I mean, it took, for some weird reason, the prosecutor only dispersed one autopsy report for the jurors to read in open court, because the pathologist, Thomas Zozio, was through Zoom. Like, he was through, you know, like he wasn't there in person. It was live, but it was kind of like this. And so they were given the autopsy report to review, and they passed it around one by one. Oh man, I should have wrote it down, but I'm pretty sure it was a couple hours of just sitting there, and while they all read it, and they did. And so at least it like gave you a sense of like, wow, you know, they're really paying attention. And it's important because Ashley has already appealed, which was, it has been, they were given the court reporter or recorder, whatever that, I can't remember what they're called. I think it's court recorder, to transcribe the court proceedings, was given an extension of time. And so it's the end of this month, I think, that she has to have that submitted to the Court of Appeals. And so it kind of leaves me in a conundrum. Like, I'm not, so once a case goes to criminal, like the Court of Appeals, the trial or plea or whatever, all of that becomes public information, and you can find it on justia.com. This is the thing that I don't know. I don't know if it is released to public, if it's released to the public before the Court of Appeals makes a decision. I would assume not, just because a lot of times, like, there'll be multiple appeals on a verdict, a sentence. And so, like, you've seen that with other, like, I've seen it on Justia in other murder cases of where there'll be like 3 appeals and they'll release all the information. So it's not like they wait until the last appeal has been decided upon. I think it is before the appeals decision, like Ivy is saying, but I don't know. And so that kind of, like, it's messing with my head. As I was sitting while Incog was on, I was just like sitting kind of like thinking about and reading through all my notes and been like, I don't really know what I should and shouldn't talk about. I'm not a court reporter. I did read, and, you know, there was a lot that they didn't touch upon. And so it's like, I don't know if that is because they know not to, or if it's just that they're just not as anal as me and they know how to summarize stuff well. So yeah, I don't know. We're going to see. There's some things that I decided just to not talk about until at least after, because it's coming up really soon. And so I'll be able to see what was added to the Court of Appeals, and we'll be able to just kind of read that. Because to be honest, like, I'm not, the way my brain works is like, if I'm listening and I'm only focusing on, you know, if I was just there to listen and take it all in with my eyeballs, it would have been locked in here. But because I was trying so hard to write, it's not locked in here at all. And then I'm having a huge trouble reading my own notes. I'm dyslexic, so you can imagine how ridiculous that is. I don't write on paper anymore, and there's a reason for it. He's not listed in it. Oh, you're talking about Mathews? Yeah, he's I'm pretty, last I heard, which was like last week, he is still on the run. But it is not related to Nicole Bowen's case. It was a drug trafficking inside of the prison. It's where Delphi goes in a cycle of interest in the same suspects over and over. Him and Kurtz come up over and over again. I know, they really do. I personally, they ain't it. That's just a personal. He sure damn looks good for it. I mean, Christopher Mathews, I don't think so. If you go listen to my podcast on his episode, I go into great detail as far as all of his my case records, and between that and Doc's Pops, I am almost positive, because he submitted something for his failure to appear in family court. And so he'd submitted a letter, and the timing of the letter and then the subsequent warrant that was put out for him in another county for another violation, I don't see how he could have been out. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I don't have dead set proof that he was definitely in jail. I'm just saying that the timing of the letter seems like it would be almost impossible for him to not have been incarcerated somewhere because of, and you'll just have to go listen to that podcast and see if you agree with me. I'm not going to get into all of that. It's on there. It's on Apple. It's in the case show notes of this show. I don't think there's any way that he could have been the Delphi killer. And and the thing is I got to talking to someone in a bar there. I went to eat at a bar. There's 3 places that you could walk to really quick to eat. And so I went one day. I didn't want to go, and so I was kind of by myself, and so I was just sitting there just shooting the shit with the bartender, and she knew who Kentland is super small, but she knew who Mathews was, and she's just like, yeah, he's such a shit, but he's our little shit, he's just that he just can't get his shit together. But as far as, I didn't get the impression, and he doesn't have anything in his criminal history other than drugs and stuff to say that he's violent. Doesn't mean he's not, but he doesn't seem to be the he likes to think he's really smart, but he's really not. And a lot of the things that he's talking about, if you look at methamphetamine abuse, they're pretty hallmark to what meth users do, taking things apart, putting them, not being able to put them back together, but just constantly trying to fiddle with things. I think he alluded to that in another interview that he did, which was another sign of his lack of smarts. When did Kurtz and Mathews stop being cool with each other? I think they kind of have this hot and cold, they're super weird. But again, they're both drug users as well. So I think that, Garrett did blame, he said Mathews did kill Nicole. So there's that. And he said that in the very beginning. But, I think that what Christopher Mathews said is more than likely that's probably the truth. And it seemed to be corroborated by Talitha Beckley and Garrett Kurtz and even Ashley Garth, that Christopher Mathews he was not there when Nicole was murdered. He didn't have any prior knowledge. They all kind of said the same things. Hey, Chris, glad you're here. So, I think that it's on and off, and I think they were both trying to make themselves look better in those interviews. They were both trying to impress her. And so you have to take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. And there's usually truths woven in. Then you just got to kind of filter out the not truths. But anyways. So Ashley was convicted of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and assisting a criminal. She was given 48 years for count 1, 30 years for count 2, and 3 years for count 3. All of her sentences were to be considered concurrent, which means they can be served inside of each other, for a total of a 48-year term of incarceration in a penal facility of the Department of Corrections. The defendant having accrued 418 actual days of incarceration while awaiting prosecution of this cause. The court grants the defendant credit for 558 days. So that's that on her. Like I said, she is appealing, and she had 2 weeks to get that in. They announced that in court when she was sentenced. So her first appeal would be had to have been submitted in 2 weeks, which she did. Now, the jury trial. Here we go, Delphi again, but maybe Mathews accused Kurtz as revenge for Kurtz blaming him. Anything's possible. Honestly, just think Chris wanted to impress the interviewer. I don't think that he knows anything about Delphi. He lied about a lot of other stuff that you're able to kind of go back and like see. Now, there was some things that he was definitely telling the truth. I don't know. I don't want to get myself in trouble. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So, I don't think that Garrett Kurtz killed Abby and Libby. Now, does that mean that he's definitely not? No. No one is required to tell me the truth. So I guess, they could be lying. But I just, it's not logical to think that they would lie. So I don't think that it's him, even though, I mean, he checks a lot of the boxes. Like, he really does. Like, he's definitely the best suspect that's come down the pipeline as far as Delphi suspects, whether they are reported in the media or on social media. I haven't seen anybody that fits better than him as far as checking all the boxes for means, opportunity, knowledge of the area, the crime scene, connection to the crime scene. He had possible, motive, or with someone with his temper, not that he had a motive to kill 2 girls, but that it wouldn't take anything to set him off if it wasn't a planned, if it wasn't pre-planned. Yeah, like if he was out there, which he did, he stated that he goes out there, and I believed him. Like he definitely has a lot of the aspects you would look for. So, duh, of course they're going to look at him. And everybody wants to take his statement that he made about, like, that's not my job. Like, they should be able to figure out where I am. That's not my job. Like, everyone thinks that is like a sign of his guilt, to where I'm kind of in the opposite camp. I think it's a sign of his innocence. People that don't have anything to prove because they didn't do it, they don't care. Like, they know, like, it's like, okay. I think what was really irresponsible was for him to be interviewed at all, because being implicated in the murder of 2 teenagers of the opposite sex when you're going into an Indiana state prison is not good at all. And if anyone that is in there with him is privy to those interviews, it could get him killed, And so it was irresponsible of him to do those interviews, and it was irresponsible to get those interviews and release them to the public. More so the releasing them to the public. Like, that, in my opinion, is irresponsible. Just because it could get him killed. And if he didn't do it, not that I feel real bad for him, but I don't think he deserves to be blamed for something that he didn't do and that he hasn't been charged with. And if he did kill Abby and Libby, I'm sure that they would have charged him, Doesn't make any sense. So, left a phone behind it, right? I don't think Kurtz is smart enough to be. I'm just days after. Yeah, exactly, Dana. Of him being a dick. Yeah, I think he does have. Has a strangling. He likes to. I mean, he strangled. 3. He did strangle Ashley Garth just before he killed Ray Hainish. So there's that. But all right. So I decided not to go into the meat and potatoes of the pathologist's testimony and cross-examination and all of that, because I definitely would not want something that I said on here to, like, I don't think that would be an issue. There was a lot of things in the trial that I was like, I was kind of expecting to see, concrete shoes. Everybody, we all know that saying, concrete shoes, bitch, fuck around and find out. Like, I expect that was one thing that was on Facebook, and I know because the detective said it in open court under oath that they used open source and social media to investigate some of this crime, Nicole's murder. So I don't know. I was kind of, I was surprised that the fight wasn't brought up, or some of the back and forth and stuff. It was like hinted at, but there was no imaging. There was a couple pictures from Facebook, but they were more just to prove that Ashley Garth was not scared of Garrett Kurtz. But yeah, so he basically, the prosecutor did an excellent job of going through and systematically lining up this case to get to the point, like get to where he was wanting to take it in his closing arguments. And so, every question you could tell was just systematically lined up to lead the jury down the trail of the truth. and do it in a way that they could remember it and like put it all together in a timeline of how things happen. Because you got to realize, like, they're interviewing all of these people, and so this person is talking about this case from their start to their finish in it, and then the jury is going back and they're hearing this from another person's their start to their finish of it. And so these timelines are kind of all over the place as you hear the next testimony or the next like video that was shared. And so you have, as a prosecutor, you have to be able to make sure that they can stay on pace with the back and forth of each new witness that's called, each new exhibit that's entered, each new, they had a lot of the video evidence of the interrogations. And so you got to be able to get the jury from point A to point Z, which is closing argument. And so it was really cool to watch how he did that masterfully. And then it was also really cool to see a defense attorney that, you know, you're like sitting there wondering, like, why did she object to that? Like, but why didn't she object to that? And why did she ask that question? Why didn't she ask this question? And then watching her from A to Z, from start to finish of the defense's, you know, rebuttals to everything that and each witness and all of that. And then you're like, aha, now I see where she was going with each thing that she did. And so because I got to see all of that, Ashley Garth, that's why I keep saying she got a fair trial. She had a very fair jury of very involved jurors. They asked a ton of questions. They took a ton of notes, and they were given a very concise, easily understood talk from the Judge Moulter, who was phenomenal. And so they knew exactly what their job was when they went into deliberation. So it was really cool to see the inside of the judicial system at its finest, you know, and it was a crazy ride. And so that kind of leads to the craziest of rides, which was Garrett Kurtz's day in court. It was like I said, this courtroom is super small. So just to kind of keep that in mind of like how close everyone is to everyone else. And yeah, super, super close to everyone else. And oh, I was going to touch on Ashley's interrogations. The first one was more so her trying to act, you know, like mousy and quiet and like, I'm, you know, like, I don't know. And she didn't give a yes or no, you know, pretty much the whole time. She was just very very cold, but oh, and I'm pretty sure she was wearing Nicole's hat during the interrogation, which, yeah, she was wearing her hat. It was crazy. Like, she wore the victim that she just helped murder. She wore her hat to her interrogation. And she also said that, she didn't come in any earlier because she was just really too tired to. She didn't sleep for days, and so she needed to sleep. So that was the soonest day that she could get there, because she was she was like the third one to come forward, but she had already been kind of called and said, hey, like, you might want to get ahead of this, kind of a deal. And so, yeah, unbelievably brazen. Yeah. Yeah, it is a very disturbing, Karina McClurkin. I concur. It's very sad. Oh gosh. You put me on your TV? That kind of scares me. It sounds so big. But oh, Karina Saunders. I don't know about that one. I'm talking about Ashley Garth. But yeah, so her first interview was really just annoying, and it didn't really amount to much. And then her second one, where it was basically, and they kept telling her, like, we've already talked to, at that point, they had already talked to two of the other, Jasmine and Garrett. And like, we already know, and they did know. They weren't just like telling her that, like, they did know. And so it was kind of like, just tell us the truth, or, like, what are you doing? But the second one, oh my God, it was vile. Like, I don't know. I didn't know it was possible for like a grown ass woman to act like that childish. She screamed like a baby, like literally like a baby. I'm not kidding, and I would make the sound, but I would totally embarrass myself. Like, she was ugh, screaming like a baby, and every time the detective would try to talk, she would start screaming louder. Like if she just screamed, he would just go away, I think. I don't know what she was doing, but she emphatically said that she did not, and her DNA would not come back, because they had just got the subpoena for her DNA. And so she emphatically said no. Hey, Cher. She was kind of giving an out, Ivy, and she did not take it at all. Like, she just kept throwing her face up at every out they gave her to try to, like, she was just, she lied, and she lied. She has not stopped lying. Like, she's never told the truth. And that was really evident in the physical evidence and forensic evidence that they had against her. I mean, you don't get your DNA on the inside of and the underneath of tape that is then directly placed on the skin of the victim, or on the underside of a roll, and on a scarf, without being a co-murderer. Yeah, that's just not a thing. And so she lied about all of it. She tried to trump up and like make it more than it was, her fear of Garrett. But Garrett and Talitha from not, and it's not like they were in court together. They weren't in the interrogation rooms together. So you have two outside sources that when they are interrogated independently, their statements are lining up. Hers is the one that's not. And that was also lining up with Jasmine and Mathews. So she's the only oddball out who is not lining up with the evidence and the other statements. So it's quite a lot, Cher. I'm almost done. So yeah, it was pretty crazy watching her just scream. And I think she was mad because just before, they had tried to get this, like, she didn't want her DNA taken. She knew that it was going to come back on some of this stuff, or had the potential to. And she just sat there and screamed like a little child. It was so crazy, and it was so annoying. And it felt like it went on for way too long. I mean, just this. She does not do anything to help herself. Like, like first interview, she wears the victim's hat and then sits there and plays with it. At one point, she was like, "Can I go have a cigarette?" They just, like, the detective had just got done asking her about, like, well, he had asked her something about Nicole and her children, like, and Ashley's child. And she was like, "Can I go have a cigarette?" And just kind of, when they left the room, this Violet that's just like trying to pretend to be like really scared and, not knowing what was going on, was cleaning her shoes. I mean, it was very reminiscent of Jodi Arias, to be honest. Like, I know everybody's probably saw that hot mess in the interrogation room. The whole walking in like, "Oh, what?" Just, and then as soon as the detectives leaves the room, it's like, "Did these idiots not realize they're still being, like, the tape's still rolling?" It's so crazy to me. Like, how do you not? I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it all. Maybe it's different when you're, like, in the room, but I'm pretty sure if I just stopped, like, doing this, I would still know it's recording. It's kinda like red, and it says live, but you would think that people would just assume that if you're in an interrogation room, it's being recorded. And there's gonna be a video. And so even if you don't speak, whatever actions you take in there, whether it's cleaning your shoes or handstands, a jury's going to get to see that someday, and it is not going to look good when you have. And that was another thing in her second interview after she was already charged, when they collected her DNA for Nicole's murder. She was like, I need to go to the bathroom and I need tissues. And then when the detective left the room, there wasn't a tear in her eye. And she never ended up using a tissue. I could watch the whole thing with my own eyes. Like, she never had any tears in all that screaming that she did. There were no actual tears. And the prosecutor asked the detective if he witnessed any. because, it is kind of far away. And he was like, no. And it was an emphatic no. Like, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, there was none. And it was awful. Da-da-da. Hold on. And that's the thing, is like, if you're going to talk, you either keep your mouth shut or you tell the truth, because anywhere in the middle isn't going to get you anywhere. So if you're ever interrogated, you either, just, you do not have to speak. And that's exactly what you shouldn't do if you're tempted to not tell the truth, because it will always kind of sneak in there at some points. And I'm not talking about it, the different techniques that detectives use, like the read technique. I'm not talking about any of that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about, as a person sitting there being asked questions, the truth's always going to kind of leak through, and like where your motivation is as well is going to leak through. And those are all things that can be used against you in a court of law. And so you should probably just sit really still and not speak, or you should just go ahead and tell the whole truth and nothing but. Because she did a whole lot of feeling sorry for herself. It was me. Well, I needed to take a nap. He, this was one, he was being really mean to me. He yelled at me. When he came back from getting, disposing of Nicole Bowen's body, he yelled at me. And then they made up by having sex in the shower. So, and when they got out, there didn't appear to be any such remorse. They went on about cleaning up the crime scene, and she was fully there. She had opportunities to leave. She stated so herself. He left her there for 12 hours all alone while he went and picked up Nicole. And so she could have taken that time to leave. It was nuts. He called me a crybaby. Mathews called her a crybaby, and that he didn't like her. And she said that she was scared of him. Of course, we knew that was coming down the road. Like, we knew that was going to be a thing. But the thing is, she also had motive, and that was proven. And she also did things that took away the defense of battered anything syndrome. It just simply didn't apply. But she pretty much denied having any involvement. That it was all she admitted to was that she tried to hit her and it just didn't land. And then everything else from that point on was all like, all of a sudden she didn't have any memories, or it was like, I don't know, maybe. Yeah, maybe, like she just didn't really have any answers. And so, and then, she started playing with the hat when the detectives left the room, and then cleaning her shoes. So in her second interview, the detective's like, they say you helped him, meaning now they have even more cooperating interrogations to tell her, to try to like help her out. But she wasn't taking the help. She's like, so when she was asked that, she started just screaming bloody murder like a baby. And she just wanted to go home. That was one of her things. She's screaming, and she, every time he would ask her like a new question, she would just like literally ramp up the screaming. It was so obnoxious, you guys. Like, I mean, it was like one of those, just like, you're so shocked that this is what you're watching, but you're also kind of like so annoyed because it was so annoying. It was such an annoying scream. And she was just really annoying the whole week, to be honest. I mean, she's got no scruples whatsoever. She's just kind of an in-your-face asshole, very entitled, very spoiled, just that's, look at the way, her own words of like, well, I needed to take a nap. Well, he was mean to me. Well, he left me here. Well, Nicole was mean to me. Well, Mathews was mean to me. Like, it's all me, 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 I. And I think the totality of the interviews, because she didn't testify in open court, was like 3.5 hours worth of just, she never shed one single tear. She tried to fake this, like when Garrett was being brought in, when the court like called, Garrett Kurtz to the stand, she started freaking out and like turning around to get comfort from her family, and was just like acting all terrified, but it was so obnoxiously fake. And I'm not just saying that because I can't stand her. I'm saying that because it's the truth. Like, it was absolutely ridiculous. And it seemed to me that her family was kind of embarrassed of her as well. She's probably just that bully in the family, that they probably have that toxic family dynamic. And she's probably just the bully. And they all just kind of like don't know what to do with her. And so they just try to make her happy at all costs, just to kind of keep her quiet. I don't know. But I mean, it was weird just watching her walk around and strut her stuff. And like I said the last time, it gave me great pleasure because it was announced that they were going to be calling Garrett Kurtz to the stand, and we had a recess. And so I was ahead of her, and so there's like the elevator, and then there's stairs. I think the elevator was broken or was full or whatnot, and so I heard her trying to loudly walk down the stairs in protest to Garrett Kurtz testifying, and she was trying to storm out of the courthouse, and I was just like, yeah, I'm just not going to let that happen. I'm just not going to let her do it. So I stood in the middle of the staircase, because it's pretty wide. It's not like your standard like hallway staircase. It's like a really wide, like maybe 2 of them wide. And so me standing in the middle with my arms out means that she would have to push me down the stairs in order to hurry past me in her fake like protest march, whatever the hell you want to call it, which was so ridiculous. And so, yeah, I walked down them stairs as slow as I could walk. Like, I mean, I was walking down and she was like right behind me and I could feel her. Like, I was like, I don't care. I'm not going to speed up, not one bit. And it just made me really happy. Sounds terrible, but, you know, she had just got done just being a complete, it was so fake. And then when court reconvened, hey, Julia. I know, I need to hurry up, but, yeah, it was so fake. And so then we come back and she throws another little temper tantrum to her family about him coming in the courtroom. And then, you know, as he comes in, it's like, oh, you know, and like, it was just literally so fake. But Garrett, he came in, you know, as just about anyone, you know, would suspect. He was just full of confidence and proud of himself. So they asked who she was to him. He said, my girlfriend. They've been together about 7 years. Was he in a relationship with Nicole? He says yes. For a few months. They asked him about a photo they had of Nicole, and he said that he thought that was probably, he thought it was taken on the day she died, but he wasn't sure. But he does know that she was wearing the hat and the boots. I think it was the boots. But then, so he was asked about, kind of wove around a little bit, and my notes were not that great in the very beginning because it was just like so distracting. But he said that, because it kind of like worked backwards at one point, and then all of a sudden it started going like in a flow. But he had said that they was asked, is this the cord that Ashley pulled on until Nicole was dead? And he said, yes, sir. He was very matter of fact with his answers. You guys saw him in the other interviews. Like, he's not one to just feign anything, or really, he was very direct, very aggressive. But he said that he was talking. See, that's why it was like so weird, because they kind of started backwards and worked their way forward. So it started with like going back to Palladino's trailer home, and then like trying to get Mikey Hiddle to sell the car, and then, hey, Doris. And then it went to like him calling Christopher Mathews. So it went like kind of backwards there for a minute. Christopher Mathews to help him, and like he had to basically track him down and like force him into it. I mean, just kind of like bugged him until he showed up, and then they took her in her car, in Nicole's car, and disposed of her body in the hunting shed. And he said to Christopher Mathews that we have a situation over here. I need you to get here right now. Christopher came, they left, they came back, and then him and Ashley had sex, and then they cleaned up, and then they left around like 10. They went back to, see what I mean? Where it kind of like dips and dives around, because then it was like they went they left around 9 or 10 like the next day. And then he left with Talitha and Ashley in Nicole's car. And then he went to Jason's house and they started to go to Chicago. And then they kind of like changed their mind. And then they went to get gas and went to Jason's, back to Jason's. And then Talitha went into the trailer. And then Jason shot at him. And then him and Ashley went to Walmart. And that's when Talitha stayed at Jason's. And then Jason, they talked about getting a ride. Okay, so that part was like he was asked about what occurred before, was this premeditated? And he said, yeah. At Jason's, they had talked, him and Ashley and Jason had talked about getting rid of Nicole. And he said, yes, several times we did. And Jason and someone else, only reason I'm saying his name is because he's been brought up publicly in the media, in like the news media. And then another gentleman, so they drove them to this other gentleman's house. So they took Ashley and Garrett were riding in the back, and they were taken to another gentleman's house where Ashley stayed and took the nap, and then Garrett had already been caught. Like Garrett had left there because Ashley was like texting other people, other men, and sending them videos or something. And so Garrett left, and he left her unharmed, just FYI. The scared for your life thing. He didn't do anything but leave. And then, yes, there was another man there, and he was the one that brought her to the police station after she had taken a long nap, and it was like days later. So I think hers was the 4th. And when she came in, and he was arrested on the 1st, Garrett Kurtz was. So she was there for, it wasn't like it was hours, it was days. And, she needed her sleep. So he asked about them being intimate, and he said that yes, they were. And asked about the hat and said that Ashley took it from Nicole. And this, and Ash was texting. He was asked like, why are you doing this? And, he said he had nothing to lose or gain. That's, kind of what the prosecutor was saying, and that what happens to snitches. And he said they die. And he said his reason for testifying was that he wanted to make it right. That 2 boys lost their mom, and I want to make it right. He was asked about, and then like while he was talking, and like he was just so proud of himself, and he's like looking at Nicole's mom and family like, like we're on some kind of a team, like I got your back, like and it was so insincere of like an I want to make this right kind of like plea, because he was so haughty and just obnoxious about like he's got that stupid smirk anyways that's just off-putting and just, I don't know. Maybe it's just a smirk, but yeah, I mean, he just was like, the only thing he left out was like a wink, like, and I can't wink. It just looks like a face twitch, but like I was just waiting for him to like wink at them or, do like an air hug or something totally inappropriate that was not really genuine, except for the fact that I do believe that when he was talking about her two boys and the things that he was saying during that time, he did seem sincere. Like he really did. I don't think anyone is born evil. I don't think drugs turn people evil either. I think it's like a combination of things. And, I think he had the family history to go one way or the other, and unfortunately he chose the other. He had a lot of like trauma in his childhood, and he has a brother, and he seems to have turned out okay. And so you kind of gotta like look at the totality of who someone is and the nature nurture thing. And drugs is definitely, it brings out the worst of humanity, not just like certain drugs, especially the meth and heroin and the likes of those. Like they really bring out the worst. And yet there are plenty of drug addicts that don't ever kill anyone. That's the same with, I was doing some research on serial killers earlier today about Herbert Mullins. And he was one of those, he was schizophrenia. And yet he was still, there were still signs woven in with his crazy delusions. And I mean, they were crazy, like Albert Einstein and dates. Like he was born on the same date. He was the 13th disciple of Jesus, and he was born on the 13th. And so he killed 13 victims. He had this thing with numbers, which is a schizophrenic type thing as well. And the dysgraphia, he was definitely all over the place with that. But like, and he blamed drug use, but yet he was still found to be like he knew what he was, there wasn't that distinction of like even though he had mental illness, he was still culpable and could be found culpable for what he did. And he was just denied parole again this year. And I totally agree with what was said about Herbert and how it applies to other cases such as Garrett Kurtz, drug use, mental illness, childhood. While it helps us to understand why they did what they did, it's there are signs that they cover, that you take, that if you don't think, basically to where someone would be deemed not responsible for their actions. I mean, the burden of proof, yes, sometimes I think it might be a little bit too high. But like with Herbert Mullins, I mean, if you think that you are doing God's work, you are not going to take steps to cover your tracks or kill someone in your 13 just because you blame them for something. Because his big thing was like, my victims wanted to be murdered by me. Like, they literally were like telepathically telling me, I'm a sacrifice. I want to be sacrificed. And so it didn't line up. His delusions like didn't line up with the like he killed someone from, he went and found him too. He went and found like a friend from high school who he blamed for his declining mental health for, I guess the guy must have forced him to do LSD and marijuana, but he blamed this guy. And so he found him and he killed him and his wife. And then the person that he had asked, he went back and like killed her. He'd gone up to somebody's house and was like, where does, such and such live? She told him, well, after he did that, he went back there and he killed her and her 2 children so that there were no witnesses to him coming there. And so inside of any kind of delusion, like even in schizophrenia, just because you're schizophrenic doesn't mean that you are not aware of like what you're doing, or that what you're doing is wrong, more so. And so, with Garrett Kurtz, like he knew. And I think he truly was. I don't know that he, it just depends, because he does have that like hair trigger temper, which totally came out in court, by the way. Like it totally did. But yeah, like it's hard to say, because like I could see where he's like he's already killed before. But he seems like someone just on a fast track to becoming a serial killer. Like literally from the time he was like 16, 17 years old, of just ding, 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 like doing all these things that kind of like led up to his eventual murders. And like there was never all of the interventions, which is another really sad fallout of our criminal justice system, and the way funding is allotted, and the way things are done. Like he really, where he should have been getting treatment, he was getting put in juvie or sent to corrupt homes for young offenders, that fell into certain categories inside of the criminal justice system, that were so corrupt. And so where he should have been getting treatment and could have one of those interventions changed the trajectory of where he went the rest of his life. Maybe, maybe not. It still doesn't take away the culpability, though. But he basically he said that he killed Nicole because he was protecting her. And he'd also, so we get to where he's talking to the, wait a second. So there was a big issue with a letter. And the letter was kind of like, I'm not going to discuss it, but like it was brought up in other times as well, but like to talk about like his motive for the murder, because there's been quite a few different type motives, and I think that they were all motives, to be honest. I think that he was killed she was killed for all of the above. It was to cover up a crime. so that they could continue to cover up crime, and so that they could continue to cover up another crime, and that Ashley was jealous of her. So I think it was literally like, I think the motive was all of the above as far as that goes. Yeah, and I think he probably did. Yeah. Yeah, I gotta agree with you there, Julia. Yeah, and I do. I think that it was Ray Hainish, but he just said that he admitted that he did say that he tried to blame it on Mathews in the beginning, and he said that he was pretty high in those 2 interviews, and then he started getting really aggressive towards the defense attorney. He was, and she seemed to be kind of like almost trying to get him to lose his temper, which you can't blame her. I mean, she was just doing her job, and you do what you got to do. And so repeatedly asking someone with a hair trigger temper in like this like really quiet voice, and kind of acting intimidated by him, because that's what he wants. That's what he likes. He wants people to be intimidated by him. And he was being called out by her in this like demure way of like kind of acting really nervous. And so he was getting more and more aggressive. And it wasn't that he didn't ever raise his voice, but yeah, I mean, it was like palpable. Like you could feel the hey Carol. Good night, crime. Thank you for coming. But yeah, like I don't know. It was some of it seemed kind of fake the way he was acting, but then there were times where you could tell he was genuinely annoyed at like her questions towards him, and he just was treating her like she was dumb, and he just was like, I'm not talking about that. I'm not going to answer that. And he was just kind of like, he never raised it. Like I said, like he never raised his voice once, but everything else was triggered. Like he was just, I don't know. It felt like in any moment he was just going to pounce out of this tiny little witness stand and just like come at her. I mean, it was pretty scary, but he didn't like, he did seem to be able to have like some control of himself, and like reined it back in. But then again, some of it did seem to be fake. Like he was like faking it. So it was hard. It was weird. It was super weird. Like I've never been in an open courtroom like in person before. So there's that. But it was just a very weird like moment in the court of him being so aggressive. And then when you get to her closing argument, then you're like, aha, like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that's why she acted the way she acted during that, because she wanted to be able to see, look how he came at me. Like, look how he came at me. And I know, like, from watching the prosecutor and the defense attorney, the way they systematically were from day 1 to day 5 of the trial, she knew what her closing arguments was already gonna be. And so, like, that told me that the way she was acting, and she's quiet, confident but quiet, but when she was cross-examining him, when she was asking him the questions that she asked, she was very even more quiet and just very kinda like Violet, like Shrunken Violet kinda acting, but then she kept kinda like, "Well, now, and doing these kinda things, and it was just different than a lot of the way she acted the rest of the time, and so that's why I say that, like, that's why it was kinda like she was doing that on purpose, which was pretty brilliant because it did work. It just didn't work in convincing the jury that he was lying. Because it's like, well, the charges were dropped. And then, they just walked through everything that they were able to prove. That, and when it gets to the end, the judge talks about reasonable doubt and what it is and what it isn't. And that it doesn't mean that there's, it's okay to have like some doubt as to, because like you got all these witnesses and now you got to go back there and you got to deliberate on like, you know, thank God the jury was like smart, because I've seen some pretty stupid juries and I'm just like, what in the hell? Like, was the judge not clear on what reasonable doubt is and what reasonable doubt isn't? Because this they just have to be idiots, and it kind of makes you really scared to have a jury of your peers. And to be honest, like, still to this day, after watching some on like court TV and other places, I don't know, I would probably go for a judge. Like, I don't know that I would want a jury of my peers. It gave me a little bit more hope in Newton County of like watching this jury. Gave me a little bit more hope that if I ever do kill anybody, um, I would want a trial by jury. I don't know. I don't know. She was like, he was asking, how long they had the plan, and he said about 2 months. Is your memory always poor when you're high? Was it clear the night of the murders? And he said yes and no. It's like typical Garrett. And then he wouldn't like elaborate. Like he didn't want to, and he knew that he didn't have to either. And so he's just like kind of like flat out refused to take the bait a lot of times, or it's just like, I'm not going to answer that. You can look it up. Like, that's not what this is about. So I'm not going to talk about it. And they just kind of like pushed. She was demurely pushing, and he was like aggressively body language pushing, if that makes any sense at all. And he was asked if Ashley wanted to be with him and didn't want to be with him. And she was like, he goes, she never said that. And he said that, somebody said it has to be done. So had to be done. After the murder, were you two together for 3 days? He said, she never tried to leave you. No. And then did you seclude her from her friends? And he said no. And which was kind of backed up because he left her at Jasmine's for, I think Ashley Garth said 12 hours. And so, if he didn't try to do that. Yeah, so that's pretty much the gist of Garrett's testimony. And yeah, I'll never forget that. Part of the prosecutor's closing arguments, I mean, he had some, like, he just kind of systematically went point by point with everything that he had laid out for 5 days straight. It was pretty awesome. You know, and he'd open with like a killer killers keep trophies. And he was like, spoil of war or a sign of victory? Was it Garrett Kurtz or the hat? And then, you know, said, you decide. But it was like, and let's talk about the defendant. And he just like went through, you know, she was there. She had a fight. She wanted to, quote, fuck her up. She admits to the fight, doesn't admit to any of the other like things. She said that she saw the bag. She doesn't admit to anything about the scarf. And that's what had her DNA on it. But there was no DNA on the other item that they had. And then obviously the tape, but was going to kill Nicole beforehand. She told blank blank she knew, which was Sergeant blank, Garrett was going to kill Nicole beforehand. Garrett Kurtz, he's guilty. He came here at his peril. He came to make it right. He told a full account of what happened. Ashley was his girlfriend for several years. He, Jason, and Ashley had a plan to kill her. He told you how the defendant helped. He said, you know, there was no DNA found on the cord, not even Garrett's. So it was completely clean, but it's also it's a, you know, you have like a porous material and then you have non-porous. And so the pathologist had gone, and the crime scene lab guy had gone into great detail and to talk about like that, like different surfaces and how pulling DNA off of a cord, or it could have been cleaned, you know, that is a possibility as well, or that cells would not stick to it as easily as they would a scarf. If you think about, you know, the shirt you're wearing, on the inside of it, you're going to have a ton of skin cells because we're constantly, you know, in DNA from sweat and everything else. But to wear like an extension cord, you know, it's not likely to hold on to, but it's also very easy to clean. And they couldn't determine, but it didn't help or hurt because there was no DNA. It wasn't like Garrett's was all over it, but not Ashley's. No one. There was no DNA found on it. There was no fingerprints. Nothing was found on it, period. So that didn't help her at all. Is your DNA going to be found? I don't know. I didn't help him. I don't know. Again, no, sure, absolutely not. There's no way, like, from the 2 interviews, like, she kept, like, you know, the first one, she's not sure. And then the second one, she's like, absolutely not. There's no way my DNA is going to be on anything. So she kind of hung herself because her DNA was on stuff. And so you kind of talked about that. Talitha, this was funny. Like, it was so hard not to just, like, get the giggles. But he was like, Talitha Beckley came in. He's like, bless her. Like, just the way he said it was, like, so full of annoyance. Just like, bless her. Just bless her. Did you pay attention is what he asked. He was like, she gave, like, vivid description of how Nicole looked, or how Nicole, like, everything about, like, what happened in the interview that you saw that was recorded, you know, days after. And then, but she came in yesterday claiming amnesia. Give her interview, you know, higher weight, because it was corroborated by other Jasmine and, you know, Garrett. And so the first one, you know, was one that he was telling them to not take into account, that she came into court and was like, well, I don't know, you know, and like claiming to not know anything all of a sudden, when before, unprovoked, she had all of the answers to everything. So it was kind of, you know, kind of weird. But yeah, like, you know, the way he closed, which was, he closed with that, you know, what he opened with, where he said, the defendant put the cord under the couch and pulled it until she died. After that happened, she told in Nicole's car. She left in Nicole's car wearing Nicole's hat with Nicole's man. So I had to, sorry, my handwriting is straight up atrocious. It says, the defendant put the cord under the couch until she died. After this happened, she fled the county in Nicole's car, wearing Nicole's hat with Nicole's man. So you decide, what was her trophy? There was like, yeah, because they're like, so, well, I mean, there was a couple days that I wasn't there that they had some other testimony, and I can't remember off the top of my head who, but one of them was the friend. I did see Hiddle, he was named in the papers. I did see him there, but I did not see him testify, nor do I remember if he did. I want to say that he didn't end up testifying. But yeah, so unfortunately, like, a lot of their co-conspirators were their social circles, but Hiddle was the one where, you know, I would definitely see where he would definitely be called at Garrett Kurt's trial, because he was the reason, like, you know, they were able to catch him. And they basically were able to do that pretty quick. But yeah. And then the defense's closing arguments was, you know, basically she went through the penal code and, you know, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. It must be conclusive and sure that there is no other alternative facts. And so they got to hear like an in-depth from her as far as where was the reasonable doubt, where everything was cloudy in this case to where they could see fit to find her not guilty of murder. And she talked about the 2019 what happened, what Garrett did to Ashley with the strangulation. She went into detail about that and how he got out on bond, and listened to each witness, and saying, like, listen to each witness and what they said. And you saw the way that Garrett Kurtz acted on the stand and how disrespectful he was. And he was. She filed criminal charges on him, and even if it was dropped, they were still filed. I asked him questions, and he would yell at me. She was fearful. She cried. Officers told her she was safe. And yes, they did, but it was also, they kept, it's like picking it, like kind of cherry picking on that one, I felt like, because they also were like, he's not here now, like, you're safe. Like, he's in jail. Like, you're safe. So it wasn't really like they were, because I've seen some detectives doing some interrogations where you're like, damn, this ain't, they need to reevaluate that Reed method. I feel like, I don't know, especially, and then the amount of hours you can keep some, just a lot, like some of it. And I think a lot of it has been reevaluated and corrected. But so basically, her defense was that she's a victim of domestic violence, and that she lied, and because she was scared of him, which, she did the best with what she had. Like I said last time, like, she, it was kind of an uphill battle, and that was really clear early on. Like, there were times where it was kind of like, oh man, I got really worried after Garrett, because he did not, you could just tell, like, if he made me feel like that uncomfortable, and I was really rooting for him, because I want her, she's a murderer and she should be charged as such. So I was like really rooting for him. And I was like, it was intimidating, and I wasn't even the one asking them questions. It was just the energy shift. And I'll tell you, he didn't shrink away from him, even though she pretended to before she even saw him, was Ashley Garth. Like, I don't know. It was weird. I'm just going to leave it at that. And then, the rebuttal was basically, pretty short and sweet, because she talked for, quite a while. I have quite a lot more notes on what she said. And, but yeah, the rebuttal was basically just kind of like, she was scared because she was going to go to prison. When they left the room, she was cleaning her shoes. Ashley called him 3 times. Is that someone that's afraid, to check on, when are you going to be here? And she knew that he was coming there with Nicole. So, like, that is very damning right there. She was left there at Jasmine's for 12 hours. She could have left. She could have gotten away. Garrett said they had sex. What was that about? Like, Talisa said that they got in the shower and came out acting like nothing had happened. Just kind of use your common sense. She was deceptive. There were no tears. She had Nicole's hat, cleaning her shoes. And, she acted in concert with another to kill Nicole. End of story. Drop the mic. It was pretty good. And so then the judge kind of went into his things that they say to the jury, and he did an excellent job, and basically just kind of wrapped it up with what all she was charged with, how, what their the burden of proof, and all the different things. And yeah, it was really cool, and it was really good. And he talked about like direct evidence, indirect evidence, and so he gave an analogy, and it was really good. And I should have wrote more about it. It was like basically like a play on words of, an animal ran in the show versus like actually seeing an animal run, and like that kind of like a distinction of like, I don't know. I totally messed that up. It's too late. That told them not to worry about the sentencing, that's the court's job. And so they just needed to, not be biased, not base anything upon like, one particular piece of evidence, but to look at it as a whole, and that they need to be to even with conflicting testimonies to find the most convincing, and they would have to choose. That they cannot hold against the defendant. She has no obligation to testify, and they're not to hold that against her. And you have to kind of re-examine everything that you've seen with your own eyes and your own views, and do not give up your own decision. And then again about the not being biased based on like how someone makes you feel. And then that the court is responsible for sentencing, and then it was adjourned. And she was found guilty like 3 hours later. 4.5 hours later, they found her guilty. So yeah. And it was one of those, like, they didn't really give up much one way or the other of like where they were going to go, and then when they walked back in the courtroom, they said that they didn't really either. Like each time that they left, like I was totally watching them like up close when we walked back after Garrett to see, like, are they trying to see if who they were looking at. Are they looking at her? Is there contempt? Are they looking at her with scowls? Are they looking at her as like, poor girl, and they really didn't, they didn't give hardly anything away with the way that their body language in court, or who they were looking at, who they made eye contact with. Like they were just a really solid jury. But all right. So it's super late. It's been 2 hours. And I need to go to bed. Well, I need to go to bed. So we'll see if it happens. But I appreciate everyone that hung in there until 2. What time is it? Like almost 2 o'clock in the morning? Or is it? Yeah, it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning. Carol, you're probably just getting up. And I know Lips is a late night. Shares late night. We got a lot of insomniacs in here. But yeah, I appreciate y'all being here. Julia, appreciate you being here. And yeah, and then I think Ivy went to bed, and I'm sure everybody else fell off too. But I hope you guys have a great weekend, and yeah, I'm glad to be back. I think. We'll see. No, I thought today, and like, I'm glad that I did the live on Shannon's page. Just if there was going to be any kind of trolling, or I've really never had a problem with it. Like, it's pretty great. I don't think I even have, I think I might have mods, but I think that they're Alabama. I'd made a couple of the people with Shannon's case mods for a live that I was doing on Shannon. And I think I saw that they were still mods, and I don't need mods, so I don't have them. And I think that helps. I think that helps to not have them, and like, everybody can just kind of relax. Like, they don't have a job to do, or don't have to worry about whether I'm going to be like upset that they did or didn't remove anybody. And yeah, and just like the way that you handle negativity, or people know that if you come in here and you want to badmouth of a family member, or like a badmouth a victim or a victim's family, or just say something absolutely crazy, shitty, off the wall, I'll just block you. It's like, I don't really care, but I don't want anyone talking about it in the chat, and I'm not going to talk about it. Just be gone. And then, when you do get weird comments or passive aggressive comments, I'm I'm fine with criticism. I think criticism as well as compliments are just about the same, because I learn more from criticism than I ever do compliments. Like, compliments kind of make me uncomfortable, to where criticism like motivates me to prove people wrong. I've always been like that since high school. Like, I was dyslexic, and I had ADHD. And so I just always was like, people, I felt inferior because I never had any help with the learning disorders that I did have. And yeah, he's on the run. He's still on the run, on the lam. But yeah, like, I always did way better with any kind of criticism, and just kind of like motivated me to prove anyone wrong, or to make sure I'm not giving a fuck. Because that, like I said earlier on the earlier live, like, that book was really amazing for me, and it changed my outlook on a lot. All right, guys. Thank you for being here, and I will see you later. Good night, or good morning.